Yeah, let me just call again.
Yeah, see, every time I hear this, I just so badly want a cocktail.
Doesn't take much to get you to want a cocktail.
Not this last 6 months.
Okay. 3 o'clock, let's call this meeting to order. Let's all rise for the pledge of allegiance, please. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Call the roll, please.
John Leo is absent.
That was weird.
John Cups.
Here.
Matt Boguera.
Here.
CC Johnston.
Here.
And Mike Naturkis.
Here.
We do have a quorum.
Good. First item is the minutes from the October 19th meeting. Let's do the open session first.
I don't see anything.
Changes? Cuts support, CC second, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? And then for our closed session.
Second.
Second, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? One-man bill committee,
Those are good. Good bills.
I'll second that. All in favor of paying the bills? Aye. Opposed? Excellent. Citizens' comment? If you're here to say something that's not on the agenda, this is your chance.
Would you get more comfortable chairs?
Ours are not.
Aren't these awful? These are comfortable. I know.
You're smart. Gotta get on this side.
He's trying. He's trying.
Do you have a comment, sir? No, no comments? Perfect. Anything on the internet? Nope.
Mr. Mayor and Council, if I may, just briefly, if for some reason I have to run out of here, I've still got a couple of people trying to get an emergency ballot. And unfortunately, I'm the only one that can do that, so I'm waiting for them to get back with me. So if I disappear, that's why.
Anything to get people to vote? Any comments on the telephone? No?
No,
Nothing on YouTube?
Nothing.
let me check Zoom real quick. Any comments on Zoom? No.
We'll move right into the city manager section.
All right, great. So the first item on the agenda, or actually the first 4 items on the agenda are all related to the Harbor Commission meeting that took place last week. The first item, item A, is a renewal for the dock and dredge license that we have at Ford Park. So Harbor Commission took a lot of public input as well as quite a healthy discussion on the operations, the spring and summer and fall. There was an overall recommendation to renew the lease for 2 years with some modifications. The major modifications are listed there, you see on the screen. Including such as there were some public comments about the barge being up when it should have been up, as well as the timing of the barges being there in the summertime. So we just kind of strengthened some of those provisions of the license and kept the fee at the same $5,000 per year. And there was, as you saw in your packet, a lot of public input from both for and opposed to the barge location. Ultimately, the Harbor Commission recommended that there is a public benefit to it. And so the recommended council approve the license with the edits and changes that We worked on the generator in the contract. You see on the screen. There's your packet.
I think the new restrictions are reasonable.
Yeah, actually, the biggest thing I've heard is keeping the boom down.
Yes.
Back.
Well, and also the way they're parking, so they're not blocking the views.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's pushed over a little bit more. Yeah.
I'm good with it.
Would you welcome public comment on this stuff?
I'm just curious, actually, just from my own curiosity, do you have a, I guess, percentage of what work is done for like the city versus PowerPoint weekly kind of thing?
Off the top of my head, no. You give me about a minute, I could figure that out.
Oh, yeah, I mean, I'm curious. I mean, I know it's a vital piece where I was just kind of curious from my own.
On a yearly average, we service about 32 docks for just regular input and output outside of kind of the one-off and special requests that we do.
Mhm.
The city, we manage or put in and take out the shopper's dock, the boat launch dock, the kayak dock at Ford Park, as well as now the ferry boat dock. So of the 4 of those, it's about 1/8 of what we do is putting in and pulling out docks for the city of Harbor Springs.
Right, okay. Thank you.
Anything to say, Mr. Bartlett?
I'm here to answer questions. You saw that the motion coming out of the Harbor Commission was unanimous. So I think everybody here recognizes this is an essential need for town. And we think that the new modifications to the 2-year lease should remedy some of the comments that we heard over the summer too. And I think they've been well received by Dr. Bridge. So it's one of the issue.
Mulder?
Would you accept public comment?
Short.
All right, first of all, I want to say hats off to Dr. Greg. You guys have some very loyal customers and things, and that was shown by a lot of the input that you guys, so that's great. Harbor Commission says you do great work, it's super valuable, and I believe that that's true too. The thing I wanted to pass on to council is that in, conversations with people during the last few months, this issue has kind of emerged as a litmus test about how the city is going to use its parks and public spaces. And right or wrong, people are kind of watching this as an indicator of, why do some businesses get to use public space and others don't? And then especially, about the rate. And, people ask me that, why does Dr. Gretsch get to operate there? I said, well, it's an essential service, they do great work, really help people. Okay, great. And how much do they pay for that? Well, $5,000. Really? I'd like to dock my boat for $5,000 for the season at Ford Park. I think I'm going to do an essential service. All right, so I can't explain that too well, and people are going to be looking for an explanation about a rate that makes sense for the taxpayers. 2020 was a test year, and it was great in some ways, but it did show that there was some dislocation and irritation of residents. So I think we just have to make sure that, number one, taxpayers get a fair price. Number two, that it can be explained. And so, the city's going to offer to let Dock and Dredge operate off city property. That's great. That helps a lot of folks in the area, right? But it does, have an impact on residents and taxpayers. So, we got to have a message about, how this rate was developed.
I needed this in for you.
Okay, thanks.
And so, it's hard to know what a reference point is for a fair market-based rate, right? But we are in the boat docking business, right, in a couple of areas. And, we can accommodate large vessels at transient rates. And that adds up to a really big number, so that's probably not applicable as a comparison, right? But, the other rate, or the other point of reference is the seasonal marina docking rate. And, just doing some swag analysis. That's in the range of $25,000 or $26,000 for a rig. So that's a far cry from the $5,000 rate that we're offering. And I just want to put that out there to the council to think about how we're going to explain this to the residents in terms of the pricing. And, so we want to offer the ability to work out of our park, great, but we got to get a fair return for shareholders and taxpayers. And, if the council isn't sure or wants more input, it occurs to me, this isn't something that needs to be decided today. Absolutely, we've got 3 to 4 more months to work on this and get it right. So if the Harbor Commission, wants to provide some more rationale for the pricing, that's one idea. Or council could just decide, what, we need to charge more and get a fair return. So, thanks.
JD, Mayor, JD, I think our rationale for the rate last year was based on the amount of work that they do for the city and charging on that amount, right? Is that correct?
Yes, it was felt that, we could probably ask a larger amount than that. The net result would be they may charge us more. And the defense of that argument is the fact that to bring in some other individual to do this work for the 40 customers or so that they have is going to cost everybody more money and may end up with 2 barges or 3 barges in the bay for the spring and fall times. And also with us not being able to regulate when they are here and when they aren't here. So with that reality, we felt that starting with a number that approximately equaled what their cost to the city was to do this work made some sense.
No, the thought is to separate those transactions, the lease, and then get some quotes for dock work, just so those are totally transparent and totally separable and explainable.
Very much. Any more discussion at the table? Well,
We'd be able to pay the seasonal rate if we could stay the season.
Careful what you wish for.
I just have a question, probably for JD. Actually, I didn't mean to ask it. Is there, I'm having a little trouble understanding the commercial uses at Fort Park compared to City Dock. I think there's state money at both places. Am I correct?
There is state money at both places and federal money included in the city dock.
And is that the one that hangs us up about commercial, not being able to discharge passengers from the ferry at City Dock as opposed to down at Fort Park?
The state allows us to have commercial use at the city dock, the downtown dock, but it has to be approved at the DNR level. And that comes with, as we learned with the grant money, considerable strings and considerable cost to the applicant on it. It generally doesn't work. They don't like to see commercial use off of the city dock.
But at Fort Park, it's okay.
At Fort Park, I think we would have a better chance of doing what we wanted to do for rates down there, which you saw we did with the
right.
barge situation.
But the commercial use is okay at Fort Park? I mean, then there's a number of commercial uses.
Yes, there are both marinas, and there's a couple of licenses that go out.
Right.
Josh Baker with the outfitter
Right,
uses that in
right.
addition to Dr. Bill.
Yeah, and that's an okay thing? I mean, there's not a,
Yes,
it is.
yes.
And then the other thing is the bottom land leases down at Fort Park, do they enter into this at all?
We pay a fee to the state based on our income for both the city dock and the voyage field. I don't believe we pay the fee, a part of our fee for the Fort Park.
No.
Might be off base, but I don't think.
No, just the dockage and moorage.
And moorage.
So that's not an issue at Fort Park.
You don't have to pay the state any money.
That's ours.
Okay, thank you.
10%, right?
Motion, move ahead, table.
I'll make a motion to approve what, on behalf of the Harbor Commission.
Contract for dock and bridge.
I'll second that.
Good. Do a roll call there?
Yep. Matt Bugera,
Yes.
CC Johnston,
Yes.
John Leo,
Yes.
John Cops,
Yes.
and Mike Naturkis.
Yes.
Motion carried.
One real quick question, unrelated to Tack and Dredge. Do Wallstrom's and Irish pay the city or, like Tack and Dredge is there, but for their usage yearly in and out? I'm just curious.
That's further
How
on
you
the
brought that up.
agenda, if they do, and we discussed that at length at the table, and you'll see the results of that discussion in the notes.
Okay.
That would be item
You'll be
C.
looking at that in a minute.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, item D.
Okay.
And so we'll move on to item B, which is the Little Traverse Bay Ferry Foundation license renewal. Again, similar to Dock and Dredge, they had a 1-year license agreement at Ford Park for the ferry to operate. The Harbor Commission reviewed that, their operations for the summer, and, sorry, I went past that one. Sorry. And they essentially found no major concerns with the operation stemming from Fort Park. There's a few minor things here and there, some incidents with the dock where part of the dock got damaged, but the ferry company paid for that. Other than that, though, there was no concern about parking. We saw Chief Knight included a recap of the Ford Park parking issues. He attributes only a minor part of that to the ferry being there. Most of it was more aggressive policing by this gentleman right here, probably. And, as well as construction at IDS, and just with the COVID restrictions this year, more people were just using the boat launch. So the Harbor Commission ultimately recommended renewing that lease with a few minor adjustments in the lease agreement, nothing major. Our license for what we've established by council several years ago was $1,000 for a license fee for a ferry. So that was just the standard fee that we pay, that we require applicants to pay for a license. So I'll leave it for council to discuss. And JB, Jim Burley here can answer any questions about the Harbor Commission. They unanimously voted to recommend approving this agreement.
Yeah, no, I was real happy with the ferry service. It seemed to be good for town this year.
Yeah. I heard nothing but good things.
Everything I heard was very positive.
I make a motion to accept the agreement as presented.
I'll second that.
Want to get public?
I'll do a roll call. Mike Naturkis.
Yep.
John Cops.
Yep.
CC Johnston.
Yes.
John Leo.
Yes.
And Matt Bulgara.
Yeah.
Motion carried.
Moving on to item C, which is other Harbor Commission recommendations. There were two, there's a few other things discussed at the Harbor Commission meeting, but two of them, one was the Harbor Master Building and the other was kayak storage. So we had, staff had a request from Harbor Commission to basically commit to when they're going to want that building, the new Harbor Master Building rebuilt and the lot redesigned there, so we can plan for what to do with the green space and other parts of that part of the area there, the parking lot, et cetera. So we asked Harbor Commission to make a recommendation whether or not they would still want to go forward with redesigning the building and when they can expect to have that accomplished, as well as where they would expect to find funding for it. So ultimately, they came to a number about 5 years. It's about a good time frame. They hope to have that building rebuilt. And so that would also mean, they would have to find money probably within our waterfront budget as well as some of our other budgets, because there would be other improvements there that would rely on, water, sewer, parking, et cetera, that aren't necessarily just from the waterfront funds. And then potentially other options to explore. So we don't really know what those are going to be like, but the waterfront fund has a good track record of saving money right now. Right now, they still want to be cautious with the potential high waters and any shoreline erosion that needs to take place, so that's why we're kind of aiming for 5 years. So that allows us as staff then to say, all right, okay, we can expect to have a new building maybe in 5 years if council agrees with that when it comes to budgeting and the CIP planning, and then we can start planning what to do with that green space. Doesn't mean we have to do something with it right away, at least we start planning for, what we do there based on what the entire green space is gonna look like in potentially in 5 years. So that was issue number 1, and the second issue was we had a public comment, a public request to increase kayak storage space at the waterfront as well as, or to change the wait list procedure. Harbor Commission decided on a 6-3 vote not to increase storage space and a 9-0 vote not to change the wait list process. So I brought both of those before you, just so you know, those are votes that the Harbor Commission took action on, which ultimately the council has authority to decide to take further action or opposite action, I guess. So no motions are necessarily needed, but I just want to bring this up for attention after discussion, because we have different thoughts.
Yeah, like 5 years, a reasonable timeline for the harbor master's office.
Hopefully sooner.
Hopefully.
We're on track, working with Nick to,
Did you get around the hoops?
Yeah.
The loops that we had to.
we're making
before?
progress. We have good summers, you saw with our financials.
But the idea would be to move forward with the last plan that was approved. So for other activities within the city, tree board and others, we could plan around that timeframe and that design should the desire for the, initial planting of trees or any other improvements to the park be done, keeping that as a template. That was what I took.
Council's already approved that plan, we put considerable work into it, now it's gone all the way through the process of approval. So I think that gives the city the opportunity to do some planning and actual some construction, I think, based on what that does. And also knowing we hope within 3 years, we're able to get going on this building, maybe some bonding to help with whatever we can't fund out of that, but it would be not a majority part of the process, a majority part of it. So I think we can start moving forward with that stuff.
Because I know the DDA and the tree board, others have wanted to do something, but there was this, well, what do we do? How do we plan it with that idea? Now,
And I think the city also needs to realize there'll be some money that this project will need from the general fund to help us with the public facilities on the north side of that building design. And also with some of the parking lot improvement plans that we've already discussed before, but they will integrate into this whole thing. So I think we got the wheels in place, now we got a better time.
That's awesome.
Yeah, great. All time.
So that's, so the waterfront, funds both the Ford Park and the city green space for the most part, but also some general taxpayer dollars go to both spots as well. So that's something to keep in mind from some of these further discussions, that, these parks are also supported by the voters who use the water and not necessarily just taxpayers. So that's something that, so what JB is referring to here is that, we'll need some taxpayer money to make some of those improvements as well.
We'll all share the bill on that one.
Share the pain.
But we don't know what that breakdown is going to be yet until we.
Well, we still got arm wrestle that one.
All right, and kayak storage, any comments on that?
I think it was a really good discussion. I mean, there was a lot of discussion and a lot of rationale behind those two votes. So the input was considered and the votes taken. I concur with the conclusion.
Yeah, I agree with you. This process has been going on for years, why change it?
It's a high-class problem is what it is.
Yeah.
And you had put the YouTube on, you have some comments?
Yeah, Mrs. Mulder, she made a comment. Could we have the green light from council to start planning process for the Marina Park? Mrs. Mulder also,
That didn't take long.
yeah, so Mrs. Mulder also asked, does this open up planning for the Marina Park, keeping the actual building site open?
Doesn't my mind, that's your decision.
Yeah, I think
I think some planning could be done.
Well, it certainly opens it up.
You're gonna need that area for construction. I mean, we can't get too crazy with it.
But it opens it up, I
So-
think, to proposals, given that this is what the ultimate
Right.
design is gonna be, we would like to do that, and then consider, yeah.
And part of this, in my
Well, give
opinion,
us some time to plan rather than wait till last minute.
part of this is also going to come into play discussion, I think, more seriously when we do our CIP planning in early December. When we do our capital improvements planning, because when we do our capital improvements planning, then we'll know what projects we're aiming for and when we're going to be accomplished by when. So I think it's fair, in my opinion, it's fair to say that we can start planning, but let's look at all our other priorities in the capital improvements and budget process, and then make a decision about when and how we should start planning for this park in particular. Because there are other, obviously, priorities as well that will be fleshed out during the budget and capital improvement.
If I could, the plan is to move the Marina building over, which is really gonna limit what we can do until that happens. And that's, we've been kind of held hostage because we didn't want to do anything because we didn't want to tear it out if we were gonna go ahead with this plan. And this plan has been on the books for how long? 5 years?
No.
5 years.
I think since we've got it
5 years?
kind of blessed by council, it's only been 2.5 years.
But it's been, the design was been going on, the process.
We've been working on it for 5 or 6 years.
I just don't know if we can wait another 5 years. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I get complaints about that space all the time. And
Yeah, but I think now if we can, like, put a plan up there saying, coming soon.
I think there's a lot of coming soon. That is a major part. I mean, I'm just saying it from my end. You know, it's a major part of our community. People go down there, and there's been some complaints, and they've been pretty much warranted. And I've been being a steward saying, hey, we got plans, it's gonna take time. But after going through the budget process, the money's not gonna be there. Grants are dried up unless we go back after a waterway grant.
Okay, I think if you look at the waterways budget, and Nick, let me know if I'm off base with this. But it wouldn't surprise me if we have 2 more reasonable years that we'll have 75 to 80% of that money to build that building in the bank.
That's reasonable.
I think that's better than reasonable.
I think 5 years is too long.
And I appreciate that. But you know, it took the Charlevoix community almost 15 years to do their renovation underneath. You can't just jump into these things. But I think the good news, and what I'm hearing at tonight's meeting, is that we know what it's gonna look like. Block out that corner from your plan, and then go ahead and look at the rest of that green space now.
But I'm also understanding in order to do the construction, there's gonna be a lot of underground work that has to be done. But, you know, you got power lines going through there, you got sewer lines. It's gonna be hard for us to come up, unless we come up with some little landscaping things to make, you know, hold people off. We can do that.
Part of the
Doing
beauty of
bigger
this
stuff's gonna
plan
be hard.
is that it utilizes most of the existing services that handle this. And all of that stuff is fed on the east side, both the power, the sewer, and the water. So I think what we've done is made it easier for planning to happen in town, because the rest of that, if we were to move that building over to the west, and there was a concept that entertained that at one point in time, that would have required a significant reevaluation of the underground utilities. Everything they need is already right there. I think this is you got a clean slate west of what's going on with that. And you didn't have that when we first started. So I think we've made pretty good progress. And it opens the door for what you want to do. I think you look at what's, mark off that square footage and then go to town.
Okay.
3 years? Nick, you can make that happen in 3 years?
I can't even predict what will be happening on Wednesday. But as JB did state, the harbor master, or the waterfront fund has had a very good year. And a decent year last year, but if things are continuing, especially with the upcoming rate increases that's next on the agenda, we very potentially, barring anything disastrous, could have 75–80% of this money in cash. I don't recommend spending every dime of it by any stretch of the imagination, but there are other ways, you know, bonding for the project, doing it all at once, and then taking, you know, $50,000–$75,000 a year to make the bond payments. Does it cost more in the long run? Yeah. Will it resolve this whole waterfront situation? Immediately, yes.
And if you bonded that, you would throw in Water Park too.
Well, I think that would be a conversation we need to have when we do our CIP, because if you're gonna go and do a waterfront project and bond $1 million plus for any of it, does it make sense to go and do Ford Park, the Marina Park, Harbor Master, and be done with it?
Well, but then you would need a plan for each of those parts.
Correct.
You need to look at the cost of that bond over the period
Right,
to make sure that it makes sense.
right.
So basically, I would say you can't answer that question.
But, you know, I mean, if we had a plan for Ford Park that everybody, but that's another year-long possible process.
That's a whole nother discussion.
So feasibly, yeah, I think if we're gonna do this somehow, some way in the next 5 years, I think we could probably do it within the next 2 to 3. But it's gonna take a couple good years still to feel comfortable with that.
And I think everybody in this room has to recognize that the water goes up any more than it did this summer. And it's on its way back down in the seasonal decline that makes some sense. So last year we didn't have that. But if the water continues to go up, the smartest thing we ever did was not do this building, because our needs for that waterfront money to keep the place alive, let alone a new building, are going to outweigh what we have to do. So I think we were smart to do it the way we did it. We took our time, we recognized the circumstances. Council supported all this stuff as we went forward with this thing. We had a good year where we could have had a bad year. Nobody knew last May what was going to happen with the marine business on this thing. So we're going the right direction.
I think anything we can do to expedite the process would be helpful. You know, if it's financially feasible to get it within 2 to 3 years, would be my preference. Just from, I think that'd be everybody's preference. But time will tell. The economy, who knows where we're going with that? There's a lot of variables.
Further comment? Moving on.
All right, thank you. The next item is setting the waterfront and marina rates for 2021. The Harbor Commission reviewed several of the rates from last year and transitioning to our 2021. They had a few recommendations. You see them up on the screen. And Nick, do we have to have a separate motion for each rate, or we can do them all at once?
I think at the council level, each rate was set on an individual basis by the Harbor Commission. So I think at the council level, I would recommend just one, unless there's a disagreement about over one particular rate. If the entire council doesn't really, is going to take the Harbor Commission's recommendation in total, one motion would be adequate.
Okay, so we had a few rate changes. One is for transient slips, which went up from Schedule G, which that schedule is attached in your packet. It was originally Schedule G, which is $40 for a 25-foot boat, and we, Harbor Commission recommended going up to Schedule I, which is $48 for a 25-foot boat. For transient moorings, the Harbor Commission recommended increasing both of rates by $5, from 20 to 25 for Series 200 and from 30 to 35 for Series 300. For seasonal dock slips and moorings, the Harbor Commission recommended increasing the rates by 3%. So you see what the 3% rate increase looks like on your screen there. For individual launch ramp permits for commercial city business, which I think this is what John Cups were talking about regarding IDS and Wallstrom, their in-city commercial business. So they, Harbor Commission recommend doubling those rates from $20 to $400. And for individual launch ramp permits for commercial non-city businesses, the rate was doubled from $300 to $600. For kayak rack space and non-seasonal mooring dinghy space, the Harbor Commission recommended an increase of $50, so from $150 to $200. And part of the rationale there was after the kayak discussion about kayak space was, well, if we increase the fee, maybe those people who don't use it as much might say, all right, well, it's not worth us for us to store our kayak for 2 days when we use a kayak 2 days a year. So I think that was part of the reason for increasing it. And I don't know, JD, if you want to speak to any other of these increases, but
I also think if you look at the seasonal slip rates, that you realize how much more expensive we are here in Harbor Springs for public slips than any other public marina in the state of Michigan. It's almost double. And the state, for the information, allows us to charge a no maximum for slip rates, but a maximum for transient rates. So that's why the rate schedule for the daily rates and where we end up now, as you look at the rates there for the season. But we are without a doubt, and not by a couple of dollars, but by 40 to 50% the highest seasonal public dock rate marina in the state. Just as I think our two private marinas are the most expensive private marinas.
Limited space. Supply and demand.
Supply and demand, yeah.
Isn't that just me, seems like $400 permit for both of them is a little cheap.
You know, John, we've been through this a couple different ways on it over the years. At one point in time,
Considering how many boats they probably charge that for one boat.
we didn't charge anything more than a regular individual rate because council felt like they paid enough for taxes and they shouldn't be hit when they get down to the waterfront. So now I feel, you know, there's other folks who feel we ought to be charging a little more on this as we keep going. They do bring some value to what happens down there. I've seen it myself, and we heard Esposito talk about it, the GM at IBS, about how they help other folks down there, and I know that happens because they're that complicated. They don't use the parking, they just pull in, drop the boat and leave, so there's no use of the lot in there, so that is different than what normal folks do. I'd say that's totally up to you, you know, how far you want to go with it, but, you know, we double it one time. Council was telling us not to charge anything because it should be a part of their tax, because they pay so much in taxes. So I think this is a little program.
Yeah, no, they do, they definitely help the boaters that don't know how to boat. I've seen that happen plenty of times.
Well, I was just thinking for what we're charging the ferry and what, you know, we're looking at Dr. Dredge, I just thought that would be at least $1,000, $2,000. I mean, even so, maybe.
It can be, you know, that's really a political decision on your part.
I mean, there was some robust discussion, I think, at the Harbor Commission meeting, and it was bounced back and forth. I think those two perspectives still exist. You know, we should charge more and we should charge more. What I found thinking about it after the fact and talking to others is that we don't really have any data. And I think at the Harbor Commission, they came up, well, there's a lot of volume that goes through and a lot of boats that go down the street and a lot of usage by commercial entities, but there's no statistics. You know, how many boats per day, per week, per month, per season that council could use to try to gauge, you know, tax contribution versus usage versus infrastructure deterioration. Sounds like that's something that we should look at the Harbor Commission level. What's the actual usage? How many, what are there, 4 or 5 commercial licenses?
There can be that many. There's only 3, I think, that are out there right now, Wire and the 2 marinas.
Correct.
Outfitter, or they are separate?
Well, he's the kayak guy. We're talking about, or I think we're talking about trailable boats.
Yeah.
So a report from the commercial usage from each of those 3 entities, you know, how many boats do they take in? That would help, I think, Harbor Commission and Council gauge what the usage is. And then a discussion about, well, what should the rate be might make more sense than, well, let's double it or let's not increase it. From my perspective, not being a voter, not being done, I have no idea what the usage is. It might be helpful to have that information. So I guess I'm in favor of supporting what the Harbor Commission, I mean, this is what you did. You talked about it, you decided on what you would recommend to the city. So I'm inclined to say, let's do that. But let's also ask for some detail behind it for next year. So we can have a more substantive discussion about what should it be, but based on some actual factual data.
That's a reasonable request.
Yeah, that makes sense. If it's 2 boats a day, that's not so bad, but if it's 100 boats a day, that's a lot of wear and tear on the roads.
Well, and also there's the issue of fairness.
Right.
And there's the issue of addressing concerns about private usage of a public facility. You know, what are we charging for it? Should we even do it? I mean, it's kind of a holistic thing. If we look at all private usage of Fort Park, we've got numbers for some of the activities, but let's give numbers for all of them.
I'll support the Harbor Commission's recommendations.
Yeah, I'll second that.
With John's notes.
That's a motion.
So is any, Andy, have any public comment?
We have 10 people viewing, no comments.
Okay, I'll take a roll call. Matt Bugera,
Yes.
CC Johnston,
Yes.
John Leo,
Yes.
Mike Naturgis,
Yes.
and John Cox.
Yes.
Motion carried.
Great, thank you.
Victor, does that conclude the waterfront issues in front of council today?
Unless you talk about putting pickleball courts at the green space in the waterfront.
Really?
No, put the tennis courts back.
Really want to be in on that one, JD?
Well,
I'm just-
Ours all summer. Pickleball courts, yeah.
Speaking on behalf of the Harbor Commission, I'd like to thank the council for their support. And we'll continue to do this while we can on there. Appreciate your support.
Thank you for all that you and the commission have.
And good luck tomorrow.
And Michael Johnson and his crew also. Good job. And with that, I'll move to the pickleball. Maybe I'm gonna listen to this. This might be fun.
Great, so, item E is the pickleball court. So last year, council had approved, redoing or resurfacing our existing pickleball courts. Based on, we had several pickleball enthusiasts come out to council, you guys probably remember, and asked for us to do something about it. We said we would put some money into it, but we also asked that they would fund some money. At that time, we weren't exactly sure how much our improvements would cost. We were looking at a complete redo originally, which could have cost up to $125,000. That's why we really were looking for a lot of donation money. But now, after Denny met with some of the pickleball enthusiasts, including Dan, they looked at proposals to just do a $25,000 fix, which would essentially recondition the surface and add some fencing and just make it look a lot nicer and more, even it out a little bit. And I'll let Denny take it away, but basically we got 2 quotes for the fence and only 1 quote for the actual paving of it. Denny tried several different contractors. None were willing to do it right now, or it was too small a project for them. So Denny, if you want to.
Okay, so Dave and I looked at the first plan that we submitted, which was to put in 4 courts at the existing skateboard area, but it was a total demolish of all the fence and the surface and starting all over again from the ground up. Also looking at the footprint, 4 courts really weren't even going to fit in that area. So we would have had to have stretched it out either more towards M119 or towards the wheelway there. And as you can see, there's not a whole lot of room to work with. So after reviewing that, and since then there's been a lot more technology out there, we're all over, you can speak on this, resurfacing is coming to be where everybody's going. They got a really good material they use to fill the cracks, they resurface it, they seal it. Also, the original plan didn't include for some fencing in between the courts, so if you play pickleball, it's really important that there's some fencing there to stop the ball from going into the other court. So we looked at it, we revised it, and what we came up with was 2 quality courts in the existing footprint at the skate park, which would cost us about $25,000.
And in those costs, you see that cost estimate we have up there. There was also a little breakdown for some future maintenance, including tools to clean the courts as an optional cost. Just we're trying to be more forward looking with our costs and to actually see what it would cost. Picnic tables in case people wanted a place to sit down while they're taking a break from pickleball, as well as court sign we have up there, and then there's always some contingency funds there. But really, we've kind of got to about budget. We have $25,000 is what we asked. The overall cost with the future maintenance, which includes the the picnic tables and tools, comes to $25,800. I'm still recommending that we still get some donations from the pickleball community because they're the ones that really encourage council to go forward with this project. So I would recommend that council go forward with this project, but I'll contingent on the good faith effort from the community to raise some funds for this project. It's no means going to put a huge dent in our budget, but for when we're trying to balance all these different projects, any help we can get from the community would be grateful.
And as I remember from the presentation and the discussion, they were pretty confident that they could raise them. So I think that's very fair.
Yeah, we still feel confident, Dave could speak on that. Probably not getting a grant for such a small of a project. Plus, like we mentioned before, grants are gonna get hard to come by. But there's definitely some potential for us to get some more donations, at least to pay for the picnic tables and stuff like that. And like Victor said, as an act of good faith. The good thing is we could actually get this done. If you approve it and we secure it with the two vendors, we're looking at early summer. If we prolong it, we're probably looking at the fall, next fall. The reality is a lot of contractors didn't even come out and look at it because it's a small project, plus they're so busy. We're working on their schedule, not ours.
Yeah, I'd really like to see us move forward on it. And, especially with
Well, it's within the budget that we talked about, isn't it?
it's over the budget, the fence.
No, the budget was 25,000.
Yeah.
Yeah, we budgeted. Oh, okay, yeah, the paving, I'm sorry. Yes, we're still in the zone.
Mhm. So the total cost comes to, 25.
$500 over, or $800 over.
This is gonna be a next year project, so not this year's big plan.
Dave, can
Any comment
you guys get a pickleball group together to do some fundraising?
I will put forth an effort to raise some money to help support this. I've got an idea, maybe 1 or 2 grants, local grants, I might be able to put a little bit of money for it. Your scope of your project changing from being a complete rebuild to just really a resurface and fencing changes what most of the local grants would allow for. They want to see a project of a larger scope to benefit the bigger part of the community. I think I can find some money within the players, and I know 1 or 2. I might try Harbor, the Petoskey Harbor Springs Community Foundation might help a little here as well. So that's what I would pursue. But I know we'll get some money, just don't know exactly how.
I think if we're moving forward and we got a plan that we can show our chances of getting donations are better. We also got the 2 townships that showed interest in donations.
That would be great.
When they came back with a proposal that fell in line with what we originally talked about, so I would say yes. We'll have to work it into the budget for next year.
I'd like to see them raise a good amount of money put towards it.
Of the bidders, when would they need to know that we're committing so they can slot in the time to do it?
They would want to know right now.
And
Old Harbor,
especially, right? The paving especially.
the paving especially, but Harbor Fence is way behind also.
Everybody.
And another potential shutdown, I mean, who knows?
Now, that was the problem with my recommendation was instead of requiring, first let's get the donated money first and then go forward with the project was because it'll put us back potentially, another year. And that's fine if that's what you guys want, but if you want to get this done as soon as possible, that's why I suggested a good faith effort to raise as much money possible by the pickleball community to at least cover some of the costs. But of course, you could always say, let's just wait until we get X amount of money, and then we go to the contractor and say, all right, put us on your books for whenever you can do it.
Which means that it likely slips from spring to fall,
Or the
and
next
we have
year.
another summer.
It'll be another summer.
Well, I would make a proposal to move forward, given that it is the amount that we budgeted, encouraging the good faith portion, and any monies that are raised can count against the money that the city spent on the investment.
I would second that motion.
I'll do a roll call. John Leo,
Any public comment first?
Public comment? Zero. Anyone on the phone?
No, I got them right here. There's still just the music playing.
Lucky you.
with no public comment. John Leo.
Yes.
CC Johnston.
Yes.
Mike Naturkis.
Yes.
Matt Bogira.
Yeah.
And John Copps.
Yep.
Motion carried.
Thank you.
Thank you on behalf of the pickleball community. Appreciate it. And I'll do my best I can to raise the money.
Finally learning what pickleball actually is.
Worth it fundraising.
In closing, I will say that the survey that was taken last winter, pickleball, was highly rated on that. And currently, the survey that's out there right now for the master plan also, I think pickleball fell right underneath dog park.
It's true though, our survey, when we release our survey results for the master plan, dog park and pickleball courts are still some of the two most requested things, so. All right, so moving on to item F, which is spring sidewalk repairs, discussion and selection of quote. So,
You want me to remove myself?
I think you should recuse yourself. Because I know that there's-
Need a motion.
So, every year, so
Just for clarification purposes, full disclosure, my wife is cousins with both of the figures. So if anybody has a concern about my objectivity, I'm glad you understand.
Oh, there's a stepbrother in there too somewhere, I don't know.
Full disclosure, just want people to know.
So basically, thanks, Jim, that's appreciated. We have, based on our street millage, council agreed that 10% of our $25,000 every year should be going to sidewalk repairs. So based on that knowledge, I had to put out a bid for sidewalk repairs, hoping to get done this fall, kind of knowing in the back of our heads that there might not be many contractors, but we decided to go with it to put out the bid anyway, just because that's what we're required to do. We need to spend $25,000 a year. I can't just say, you know what, no, we're not doing it this year. That needs to be a council decision. So we put it out to bid for the fall. We got 2 bids back, one from Cups Masonry and one from Keller Caretaking. They both said they can't do it until the spring. So we put it out for the fall. We got 2 bids back that said they can do it this spring. Keller Caretaking came in at $23,900, while Cups Masonry came in at just about $26,000. So there was not a huge difference, but Keller's Caretaking came in a couple $1,000s under Cups Masonry. So really and council has, I think, a few options. One is to select one of the bids for a policy. The other option is to rebid this as a $50,000 project for next year. Because what we were going to do was do a $25,000 project in the spring and a $25,000 project for the fall to kind of meet, because we have to do $25,000 each year, we wouldn't make it this year, so whatever. So now if we redo it as $50,000, we may get better bids or we may not get better bids than what we got here. These both fall in with, give or take minus a little bit of what our projected goal was, $25,000. One came at $23,900, one came at $26,000. So if we rebid it, we'll probably get more quotes if we do it for next year for a whole $50,000 project, but I had to take this to you based on the quotes that I received, and I wanted to make sure you guys knew that I bid it out for the fall, but they can't do it until the spring. Keller's came down, as I said, by $2,000 less. They're both local companies, so there's really no. We do have in our purchase policy allows for a local incentive.
Yeah. So it might be better to bid the $50,000 project.
We have $50,000 worth of sidewalks to be replaced.
Yeah, that's we were going to do $25,000 this year, next year.
I think the quote cycle was short. We kind of knew it wasn't going to happen in the fall. I agree with Matt. I think we should reissue it for next year, larger chunk of business. Let's see if we can get more bids and, more volume, better deal. I think it's worth considering.
Are there parameters with the companies that we're taking bids from? Just full disclosure, I did read John's letter that he sent in for everybody. Did you guys all read that? Mm-hmm. Okay. I've worked with Keller quite a bit also. I didn't even know they did cement.
So they do have for example, they did the Traverse Street sidewalk last year, parts of Traverse Street, they did parts of West Bluff sidewalk. They said that they would, got some further information from them for this. They said they would subcontract to, for the actual flat part of the sidewalk to McFarland Masonry, and they would have their landscaping people would actually do the ones removing the sidewalks and restoring it, but they would subcontract to McFarland for the actual actual sidewalk work. But they also have someone else, it's not McFarland, that has done the sidewalks in the city before. It's been, what's his name, Peter Board, Paul, what's his, Phil?
Phil Morris.
Phil Boers, yeah. He's done sidewalks for 3 decades.
Right. Yeah, he used to work for Harvard Excavator.
So that's who they use and would use.
Kelly's got 2 guys who have done concrete work before.
Okay.
I was gonna have them do a project for me, but the weather postponed till.
I figured we could throw a bit in the hat, you and I can do it.
Yeah.
Our policy does say qualified members.
That was sort of my question. I didn't know he
Yeah,
actually
yeah.
did cement work.
Yeah.
So, okay.
I think, what do you guys think?
I like the idea of waiting around and just doing one shot.
All right.
That's what I thought.
Put out a larger bid.
Just simply because, what are we gonna do when we park this year or next year, then, oh, you're down the road, why can't we just do it all in one shot, let's just get it done.
Well, it's not gonna get done this year anyway, so we lose nothing by waiting and seeing if we get better bids.
Do we get a better bid if we get it all done in one shot, though, maybe, better price?
I'm guessing we would.
Yeah, so if
my
you
thoughts.
bid it out, the $50,000 and have it done in the spring.
I'll have Lucas and engineer do that. I guess we should get a vote for that, just so to say that we're rejecting both bids for this trend since it was official bid.
Motion that we reject both bids and rebid the project for the 2020 work and 2011 work combined.
Second.
Makes sense.
I guess we're on a roll, so I might as well continue. CC Johnston,
Yes.
Matt Bugera,
Yes.
Mike Naturkis,
Yes.
and John Leo.
Yes.
Motion carried.
Great, we'll just wait till John comes back in for item G, which is, we'll get Jeff. Oh, there he is. He snuck in.
He's right behind us.
All right, item G is approve a county designated assessor. This is something new from the state. They're requiring that each county has a designated assessor that can, available in writing in case the assessing unit, which would be City Harbor Springs or whatever township, is deemed not to comply with the Property Tax Act. So what they do is they find an assessor that they would designate as the county assessor. Here they pick Jamie Houseman, and they need a majority of the townships and municipalities, in the county to vote and approve this person to be our designated assessor. So we have to either approve or not approve it. And Jeff can do just a little brief explanation of what this designated county assessor is.
So, short story, in an alternate universe, let's say that I did a horrible job. And the state has what they call an audit of minimum assessing requirements. And every 5 years, they go to all the municipalities in a county and they run through and make sure that the assessor has completed all the tasks that are required to have an accurate assessment roll and assessment database. If they find some flaw in that, they provide you with an opportunity to correct that locally. They give you until the next audit to correct any deficiencies. If at that next audit, you're still found deficient of certain aspects and they feel it important enough, they will order you to correct that issue. And in that memo that I think you passed out, that pamphlet, they provide 3 ways that can be done. You can hire an outside company, you can hire another person, or you can ask the state to do it. One of the choices is to go to the designated assessor to have them correct the issue. Basically, that would be somebody locally that would be serving that for the community and whatnot. Jamie Hauserman is the equalization director for Antrim County. She's been doing assessing for a long time. I would see no reason why we would have any concerns or issues with her fulfilling that role for Emmett County.
Thanks, Jeff.
If you're comfortable with her and the counties, town's choice. I don't know any other assessors that have to
It's out of my realm.
And the likelihood that we would need that service would be, very out of the ordinary.
She like a third party kind of thing, or would she work actually for the county?
She's the Antrim County Equalization Director. So the next step above local assessing, the counties perform a study on each of the municipalities, and they report that study to the state. And she fulfills that role for Antrim County, working at their office at the courthouse.
So she'd leave Antrim and come to Emmett? Is that what I'm?
No, a lot of equalization directors and a lot of assessors do multiple contract assessing on the side. I think what this would be is, depending on the necessity of what the issue was that we needed to correct. If it was something that was extremely time consuming, worst case scenario would be, you probably heard of, some municipalities needing to have a full reappraisal. In a case like that, this would be somebody that would organize the work and make sure that tasks were being done timely to fulfill whatever requirement we had to get ourselves back in compliance with the state. They might not necessarily actually be doing the work on the ground.
Perfect. We need a.
Yeah, we need a motion to approval.
I'll make a motion to
Approve James.
approve it as presented.
I'll second that.
I'll do a roll call because I have a suspicion that the county will want one. Mike Naturkis.
Yep.
Matt Bogira,
Yes, sir.
John Cups,
Yep.
John Leo,
Yes.
and CC Johnston.
Yes.
Motion carried.
Thank you. Thanks, Jeff. So item 3H, employee healthcare opt-out. So every year we come back to the city council for, to go with for employee healthcare. The state recommends, you have three choices basically: to opt out, to pick 80-20, where the city covers 80% of the premium plan costs, so the employee costs 20%. And this year, what we're suggesting is, we noticed a trend, and you probably read in Nick's memo, and I'll let Nick talk and attest to it, but our employees, especially our employees that are clerical workers, are more lower paid employees, they're seeing a drastic decrease in their take-home net pay because of the increased cost of healthcare. So every year they're getting a cost of adjustment, a raise, but they're seeing a smaller paycheck because healthcare costs increase. And as a typical, Nick described a typical employee in his memo, and right now in 2021, if we go at the current pace, an average employee would be taking home only 46% of their paycheck. That's because of the healthcare costs. And this is a problem for us as a city. It's not so much for us who get paid more. It's not as big of an issue because that amount is the same. It's a small percentage. But for our clerical workers, some of our DPW guys, it's a big drain on their paycheck. And the problem for us is, if we can't retain and recruit the best employees if their paycheck is going down year to year. And I don't think that's a sustainable way of, and it's not necessarily our fault, it's the healthcare plans are going up. And so what we're proposing is that the city covers the 100% of the premium plan, which the employees would still be responsible for deductibles and all that. We would just be covering 100% of the premium payment. And that would come from the different funds. Some of them would come from the general fund, others would come from the water and street, waterways fund, electric fund. So it wouldn't be a complete burden on the taxpayer. It'd be a smaller increased burden on the taxpayer. But there's also another way to pay for it, and that is charging more administrative fees to our departments, our different funds. So I'll let Nick give a better explanation of this, but you saw in his memo, which was quite succinct, but also very good, so I'll let him.
Thanks, Victor. Well, just to kind of sum up what Victor's explained here is, for a long time, the governmental sector was where employees came knowing that they probably wouldn't be making the dollar per hour rate as the people in private sector. But the benefits were always, what was the draw to get and retain employees. Well, over the last even 15 years, That's starting to not so much be the case. As we get into negotiations with our two unions and, we're negotiating minimal wage increases, not knowing where the healthcare system and the retirement and all of that is going, we found ourselves for the last quite some time on this downward slide and since I've been here in 4 years, we've hired, I don't know, 4 or 5, 6 people maybe throughout the city in different positions, but we just don't get any applicants to speak of quantity and quality. I mean, we've got good people with but we're just not drawing from a bank that is big enough to sustain. That coupled with the fact that to get employees to come here, as we all know, especially our business owners, they cannot afford to live really anywhere close to the city that they work for. And to me, that's unacceptable, personally. But that is not the city's fault. That is just the economy of this resort community. So in looking at these it's a 1-year thing, or else I would probably have presented this in a different fashion. 1 year up, see where rates are going. But my long-term situation would be to opt out, put some more disposable income in our employees' pockets, hopefully be able to retain people, get more and better applicants for jobs, and then just revisit the situation as the economy changes every year. And then start looking at union contract times, looking at different options and health insurance policies. All right, if the city's going to absorb all of the cost, maybe let's look at a little bit less of a policy going forward to, alleviate some of that cost for everybody. But that's something that can't be done until union contract time. So I guess to sum it up, I've called different municipalities, not only in northern Michigan, but I didn't include them in there because there was really no data that made any sense. 10 years ago, everybody was opting out. Well, this became into effect 2011. Everybody was opting to the 80-20 or the hard cap of the 2 because that's right after the property taxes went down and municipalities had limited income. Now it seems that states and townships are starting to boost their benefit packages up. I think at Charlevoix and East Jordan, their benefit packages are out of what I would ever want to reach for the city. But, Petoskey does something different. Everybody's doing things a little different, so I can't say a third of the people. 72% either do the opt-out. The rest of them, this is statewide, the rest of them that reported to the MML are opting out. The rest of them either do 80-20 or hard cap or don't have benefits at all, something along those lines. So usually every year we just go through and give you guys the resolution and say 80-20, let's opt out. This year I actually looked at it and see what kind of an effect it was having on staff. And this is the trend I found where it's like, okay, their disposable income is dropped drastically in just the last 5 years for these factors. And I just want that to be something that you're aware of. And I guess it would be my recommendation to give it a try for a year, knowing that we have to readdress this again next year at this time. So this is not.
Can be made next year. We can opt in or opt out.
Yes, we can go either direction on a yearly basis, but I wanted to see how this affects, obviously the budget. It's not just general fund dollars, it's across the electric, water, sewer, as Victor explained, based on where our employees are at. So, but it is an additional cost to the city. So that's why we're having this discussion. I would rather have your input.
Can you elect to pay one employee's insurance and not another's?
Unfortunately, no.
So you put it in their pay, is that how that works? That offsets it?
What, pardon?
So are we increasing their pay to offset it? Is that what's?
No, what this would be, for instance, right now, if you look at that, this is an average, this is actual, not one person's data, not an employee, but this is an actual wage scale from what our employees get paid. So if you look at the Blue Cross Blue Shield on the bottom, that's actually withheld from their paycheck every day, every 2 weeks. But as that number increases, then obviously their take-home pay decreases. So no, we're not grossing up wages. As you see, we went from 1409 to 1434 to 1470. Those are anywhere from 1.5% to 2.75% wage increases, which is immediately getting eliminated with a 4 or 5% Blue Cross increase.
So basically, Mike, so we wouldn't be increasing the pay, we would just, the employee would not be paying any of this 20% Blue Cross Blue Shield. So for 2021, this employee would not be paying that $344. So instead they would get a check, their paycheck would be $1,050 as opposed to $719. So we're not increasing we're just covering the cost of the health care portion that they are paying right now.
Right, my question is, if you offer it to her, would you have to make that same offer to him?
You have to do it across the board. That's what we talked about.
Oh,
because-
okay, I got it, all right.
Sorry, I misunderstood.
Yeah, I thought for some reason you were just talking about.
Yes, because I'd originally thought, okay, let's look at this on a level of, some of our medium level employees that are not necessarily at a higher wage. Let's just go that route and everybody else stay 80-20. Can't do that. That's not part of the law. At least nothing that I can find from talking to state legislators that have put this into place. This isn't coupled with the retirement increases. It's just kind of a long-term effect of legislation. Do I think the city should pay every dollar of every benefit for everything? No, I think the employee needs to be on the hook for co-pays and deductibles. And, we have a $6,000 out-of-pocket annual cost to each employee. That then on top of this, that becomes somewhat cumbersome as cash flow issues for people, with families especially.
Could we do a 90-10?
That's the other, I looked at that, not that I'm aware of. It's 80-20 hard cap, and I did the analysis on the hard cap, and that would actually was a lesser of the three options for the city. Second, opt-out costs the city the most, obviously. Then the hard cap would be the next. Well, there's the dollars there.
It's a pretty substantial raise for some of these guys. That would make the union negotiations easier, I think.
Well, I mean, that's something that no doubt will come up. I mean, we've got just now 2 years and we'll be back in contract negotiation with both unions. It is. And I wish there was a happy medium where instead of jumping from one ship to a better ship, maybe walk the dock for a little while, but that's not the option. But this is entirely as policy setting. This is in your guys' realm based on the information that I've seen in my analysis.
Well, the hiring and retention of key employees is critical. If we're not competitive and you're not getting applicants for open positions.
I know especially in our police force, I mean, Kyle's had an extremely difficult time getting anybody to even apply for any positions. He gets maybe 2 people apply.
Same thing happened with our electric department.
Right, yes. In our linemen, we had one applicant, and that's frightening.
Well, as you mentioned, we're already fighting housing costs. This just makes it even less palatable. So if we decided to do this, then those numbers, those new numbers would be factored into the budget.
Yes. And the only reason I would even probably have brought this to your attention, if it was something that we were locked into for anything more than 1 year, I probably would have not even addressed it until the end of contract time. But being how it's just a year and then we can say, okay, that did not work out budget-wise for us, we're going to come up with something different. And I have heard talk from different legislative levels that they're talking about making some changes to this law that was passed in 2011 anyway. So, but who knows?
One thing to consider is if we do this for a year and then a decision is made next year, that didn't really work out for the city. The takeaway from the employee going back 2020 is gonna be pretty severe.
It is, and I think that's where it would be a position then what the city could say, okay, we went down this path and it's just not feasible for the city as a whole to continue. Now let's look at reducing some benefit packages health-wise, maybe looking at different, different health insurance companies rather than one.
Just, been there, done that, taking something away.
No, right.
You also look at it from the employee's perspective, is that their paycheck has been dwindling, so.
There's no easy, long-term answer to this.
So for example.
I feel it's the right thing to do, but based on what you were saying, based on what you're saying, if the city changes its mind a year from now, that's a painful change.
We have, and I respect that, and that's a good point, because we have some employees though that have been here for 20, 25 years who are seeing their paychecks, they're like, I put this many years in the city and now my paycheck every year with my raise is getting smaller. So what kind of reward are we giving our employees? What does that show how much we care about our employees? We want to have the best quality, retain the best quality employees. I think I personally agree with that. I also think the taxpayers, for the most part, would want to have the best quality employees that we can possibly have and to stay with the city. So I think it's a burden that, if we need to make some budget adjustments, cut somewhere else in the end for something else, then we do that. I think having quality employees is the most important part.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, that's kind of where I was headed.
And
Doing this change, agreeing to do this, then kind of starts the clock ticking to find a different way to maintain this going forward and to find the money somewhere else.
And to briefly touch on that and not drive right directly into the budget conversation, but I thought, okay, how this is going to affect primarily I look at my general fund because that's taxpayer dollars. How's that going to affect this? Okay, it's going to cost an extra $25,000, $35,000 for the general fund. I looked across the board at what we have in government is administrative fees, which are charged by the general fund to our enterprise funds, which are the electric, water, sewer, and the waterfront fund, which are run like a business. Right. They're run just like a private business, public, like your business, for instance. For profit, correct. And the general fund's employees and everything within here support every one of those funds. So there's an administrative fee that is charged to all of these other self-supporting funds. And that hasn't been adjusted for at least 20 years that I could see in the records. So even just doing a small 2 to 3 to 5% increase on those administrative fees is going to cover the effect of the general fund without putting any extra burden to speak of on those for-profit funds, if that makes sense.
A good example of that, for example, is, I staff the Harbor Commission. I prepare the packets. I spend, several hours a month in the Harbor Commission. But we should charge the Waterfront Fund accordingly for the time that I spend, Andy spends, Nick spends, Denny spends, whoever it is, spends working for the Harbor Commission. And it should reflect properly the amount of work we do. So that's the general gist of it.
Well, no, it hasn't, if those fees haven't been adjusted for that long, that's long.
And I believe Petoskey, as you said, indicates to me, they do theirs every year, they adjust theirs.
Yeah, they adjust yours on an annual basis once they get all of the benefits and the wages and the cost of living increases, and then they pull it all together and say, okay, this is what they should be for this year. There's years they might actually go down.
That sounds like a good model.
And that's a conversation that I have a whole plethora of other issues to deal with at budget time, but that's a topic for a different conversation. No, I'd be more than happy to turn over the keys.
Have you looked at something besides BCBS?
Yes, and that's where we get into negotiations, which I can only talk about very limited in a public meeting, but those are talked about every contract negotiation.
I've got seen something else done, man, asked if we could go to 90-10, we can't do it because of too darn sunny in here. We can't do that because of the structural aspects, but there's a way to achieve that I've seen before, and that's to give people an allowance, $250 a month or $250 a pay period to help offset the $342,
Yes, we
which
do.
could achieve what Matt was talking about.
Right.
And there is the tax implication, or it's the gross up. But that is a way to say, we feel your pain, we know what you're going through. Here's an allowance that we're gonna make do. We can afford it this year, no guarantees, no promises for future years. But here's what we're gonna do. Then every year you can decide.
That is an option to gross up pay for that. I don't know,
Portion of it.
they call it a stipend of some sort.
Yeah.
And then there is the option of going completely with a high deductible health plan with an HSA backer,
Yeah.
where the city can fund that HSA up to the max amount, but that can't be touched unless we open contracts back up.
And there's a
That is
tax
the new trend,
implication to the employee.
HSAs. Sorry, Jen.
There's a tax implication to the employee when you gross up the check.
Yeah,
Right.
there is.
It would eliminate their check falling down and us picking up.
Right. No, I mean, all of these are to be considered. You just have to figure out what's the best route to take.
And the only reason this is before you now, rather than budget season, is our plan year begins December 1st. So I have to have a resolution by the board before the plan year begins.
You feel that the adjustment in the fees that are charged to the operating entities would cover this?
Yes, I do not want to put a tremendous burden on our utilities or the waterfront fund especially, because they have large plans. However, I do feel that it needs to be addressed that city staff actually runs an electric utility and
Right.
a water and sewer system.
There has to be a fair fee for services that the city provides, which they would have to pay for somewhere else if the city didn't provide.
To come to ask to spend more money, I'd rather tell you guys no than to be that guy to come and ask for it. But I think this is something when we're talking about improvements and everything else, because in my mind, what makes up a city? It's a few sidewalks and the staff that runs it.
Well, like Victor said, it's our most cherished resource. So I would make a motion based on this conversation and the idea of looking forward towards ways of short-term offsetting of the fees, long-term coming up with a more comprehensive plan to approve your proposal. Opting out.
Let's second that.
All right. Roll call. C.C. Johnston.
Yes.
John Cops.
Yes.
Matt Bougera.
Yes.
John Leo.
Yes.
And Mike Naturkis.
Yes.
Motion carried. Thank you. Thank you.
Staff will be appreciative.
And we will have more discussion about this and how it works and what we're looking at long-term within the month.
Okay, the last item on the city manager section is COVID-19 updates. I don't have the numbers quite yet for, I'm sure that they posted them up for this weekend's cases, but basically COVID is on the rise in Emmett County. As of this writing, 1/4 of Emmett County's COVID cases happened last week. So since March, all other cases, 1/4 happened in a week. So we are being more cautious here at City Hall. We're increasing mask usage. We're decreasing the amount of contact that different departments have between each other. So for example, we're keeping water separated from electric, separated from streets, having only the supervisors of those come in to the buildings, across buildings. For us at City Hall, for example, the 7, 8 of us that work here at City Hall, if one of us tests positive, we all have to go home and until we get negative tests back. That's just the health department orders. So we close City Hall for probably about a week if either one of us tests positive. So now, while some of us can work from home easier than others, it still puts a damper on our productivity. DPW, same thing. You have a couple guys out, even if their family members are tested, like they have to be out. So this is, it's here. It's coming sooner or later. I mean, it's inevitable that someone will get it, but we're doing our best at City Hall. We're doing our best to increase mask usage, we're keeping our door locked now we have a new lock on our door to employees. People have been barging in from the public into our employee park. We have a sign that says stop, but people don't stop, they just go through it. So now we have a keypad lock to prevent people from going. It's just trying to keep my employees feeling safe and keep the interactions with the public to a minimum. I hope we don't have to get to the point where we shut down, but I know schools and other places are shutting down. We're going to do our best to stay open and to be cautious, but it's, we just got to wait and do our best. So I just want to bring it to your attention that COVID it's here in Emmett County. It's on an increase, and we don't know what it's going to look like for Michigan. The test positive was the number of cases coming back positive has gone up from 3% to 9% in about 3 weeks. So I mean, just in the past week, it went up from 6% to 9% tests on that. So it's definitely spreading. Most of us aren't, necessarily worried at City Hall, for example, worried about ourselves, but we're worried about if we give it to someone else, immunocompromised person, or if we give it to someone who's elderly, a family member. That's really where our concerns are lying with spreading it ourselves.
The new dashboard is up right now with 56 cases.
Today?
And I think this is probably for the weekend. This is dated November 1.
And I can tell you that EMS ran 6 runs today, all COVID positive, and a couple of them, I don't think made it to the hospital. So death toll is going up. It's affecting the elderly. I mean, it's here.
So on that note, I would hope to encourage that. I know I see a bunch of people here today, but encourage all future meetings. I mean, I don't want to say no attendance, public attendance yet, but if we need to do that, council wants to do that, even if council members want to go remotely, I mean, that's something I think you guys should weigh, because I know it's better to have these meetings in person, but if we're concerned about the spread, I think it's up to council to decide how they want to proceed with the meetings. If you're comfortable with this, or if you want to do Zoom, that's fine, but or do we wait to see the statistics? I'll leave that up to you, but it's really more people than this. It's really hard to keep 6 feet apart in this room with the setup that we have. So.
And along that lines with COVID and this room tomorrow, obviously we're all aware is the election. It's a hard animal to manage in a space like this when you're trying to stay 6 foot apart and wear a mask and glasses are fogged up. And so everybody just be patient, anybody that comes to vote in person. I've had 700 roughly absentee ballots go out, and we've gotten 90% of those or better back. So with 1,225 or whatever registered voters, we're already have a substantial turnout without even getting anybody through the door.
Those are not our usual numbers.
No, since I've been here, I don't think I've seen anything higher than 60%, and that's where we're at before I even unlock the doors in the morning. So it's going to be a busy day, but it can only be so busy because there's only so many of you left that haven't voted.
So we will have there'll be poll watchers, observers here. So for those that are that they're also up for re-election, just if you do come to City Hall, try to be patient with us. We're trying to we can't tell anyone no to come in here, but because it's voting day, it's your right to be here. But
there will be poll watchers, registered challengers from different factions that will be here. The press will be here for sure. So just beware.
Who's going to win?
Doesn't matter to me at this point. Just want it to be done.
Yeah.
Let's see if there's any. All right. You guys have any comments on the COVID, or is that?
No. Changes daily. Right now it's going up to the down.
Probably for the next meeting to decide on how we want to proceed as far as having virtual meetings.
Okay. All right. Well, okay, that makes sense because it could potentially be a new council. All right. Well, then I'll go really quickly then to my city manager's report. Again, we were at 45% when I wrote this, but that was my estimate. But Nick is the clerk, so he can tell you we were closer to 60%.
Well, I'm just taking numbers from Patty and doing quick math in my head. So
The subcontractor for the Stairway Fix, they got back to us and said their parts are on back order. I've been contacting them and reaching out to them for the past few months, and they said they were scheduled 2 weeks ago to come out here, but then they came out and said they needed some parts. So, and Nick, I believe Elmer's, you still have some payment that we can withhold from them or not?
Yeah, Benchmark Engineering will not pay out the final 10%, or the withhold retainage, I guess is the term for it, until they sign off on it.
We are hiring for an open dispatch position at the police station. Yvonne had been working for us for 26, 27 years, part-time, full-time. We will come back for recognition for her at the next council meeting, but, so we are looking for someone to fill her position, so that's out there. Our spillway landscape design survey is on the website, so I encourage people to take it. And also, we have 6 master plan surveys up. Our goal is still to send out a letter to each homeowner saying that you can take the surveys online, but we won't do that till December when we have the majority of our surveys up on the website. The Harbor Springs Area Fire Authority, this is for a boards and commission meeting, agreed to let the city install solar panels on its state road fire station. So we have RFP, a request for proposals out for that solar project, and we're getting a lot of interest from different solar companies, so that's good news. And then I've had a few different meetings, a couple of them with MPPA, and the Michigan Planners Association on coastal leadership. So that's really all I got going on my end. That's all. So,
That's a lot. Maddie Hines termed out on her zoning board of appeal, and I reached out to her, and she's willing to serve again. Because that's a legislative board, we probably have to do a roll call.
Yep, we should do, roll call.
But, so anyways, I'd like to reappoint Maddie Hines. She's been on the board for a long time, this is her job.
She asks good questions.
She does ask good questions.
We don't always agree, but she asks good questions.
Well,
Support that.
We have a motion by Mr. Mayor and second by Mr. Cups. Leo,
Yes.
Johnston,
Yes.
Yes.
Maturkis,Ugera,
Yes.
and Cups.
Yes.
Motion carries.
also mayor, the planning commission.
Yeah, we're looking for another planning commission volunteer. We've got a couple applicants already. Planning commission.
Lee Kramer offered his resignation. So he was really thankful for the time, but with COVID stuff and he not be able to communicate easily through all the different ways. He feels like it's hard to be there in person, but since he can't be there in person, it's just better for us to do. So we're thanking him for his service, but we are looking for another planning commission member. So we'll put that on the website that we're searching for someone.
Mr. Call, actually, I won't start calling until after Tuesday.
And I reminded council members in your election, council members, those of you that are up for election, win or lose, this council term goes to November Sunday. So that if you lose election, whoever it is wins, they start on Monday, next Monday. So that's how it is per our term. So for those that are running and for those that are here, so you know, we still have to do this for your summer. Planning commission. You didn't like it, look at it.
One more.
All right.
So
Any new or old business?
Yeah.
Mike? Anything from the audience?
Actually, like I say, Victor and I have talked a little bit, because of the COVID thing and stuff like that, I may, sometime by the first year, we'll work with Victor and Raymer on proposing the fire code within the city. Again, simplified and stuff like that. I'm enforcing it with basically no backing right now. It would be nice to have something in place. Right? So, there's something I'll bring up at a later date.
Well, if there's nothing else, I'll adjourn this meeting. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
She volunteered.